Fights Now. I am Tyler Ireland. With me today is Garrett from Football Analysis on YouTube. Dustin is on vacation, headed his way to Norway. So it's us here today for the start of mandatory minicamp. And we're going to be talking about, just some of the bigger storylines of the day. Garrett, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing good. It's another day closer to football, and somebody tweeted out last week that I think it might have even been Scott Hansen, the man himself, but we were 15 Sundays away from the Super Bowl, and we were 15 Sundays away from Week 1 of the NFL, and that was a little over a week ago. So now we're even closer. We're less than 100 days. Weather's great. Life is good.
It's summertime in Minnesota, so I mean, weather's beautiful. It was a windy day today at practice too. We'll get to that later. But first, the biggest news is the Justin Jefferson contract extensions. I just wanted your quick thoughts on that. If there's anything from the contract itself that sort of piqued your interest, or just your general thoughts on the whole of the Jefferson extension.
Yeah, so with JJ and extending him, that was something that everybody wanted. And if you are a Vikings fan saying, oh, we paid too much, I mean, I'm sorry, but you have to pay for talent. There's if you were to trade him and try and get multiple first round picks, all you're doing is trying and hoping you're getting a player even close to him. So I'm all for it. His cap hits in 26 is 39 million. His cap hit in 27 is 43 million. But at the end of the day, who cares? I mean, you have to pay for talent. And not only that, but we have JJ McCarthy, and not only JJ, but we also have Dallas Turner on rookie scale contracts. So we have two of the most important positions in the sport on the discount for the next few years in quarterback and pass rush. And not only that, but the reality is with Justin Jefferson, this isn't your typical, 12 or 1300 yard receiver that, maybe he got overpaid a little bit. I mean, no, this is a player that you have to pay. And whatever the price of gas is, guess what? You're still going to have to fill the tank up. So I'm all for it. And I thought it was a great deal for both sides.
Yeah, it felt like once Kirk and Hunter left in free agency that like the Jefferson domino is going to fall. Like there was never a period of doubt for me that like Jefferson was going to sign that extension because there's no one in the Vikings organization who's dumb enough to say no to that. Like there would have to be a level of sheer incompetence to try and get cute with Justin Jefferson and, basically fumble the bag, so to speak. And also, too, with Jefferson, he's just going to be so important for JJ McCarthy and his development when he eventually starts, whether that be, late this year or next season. Having the top receiver in football to go along with, a top five tight end and arguably a top five running back in Aaron Jones is really going to help JJ McCarthy and Sam Darnold a ton. So props for the Vikings for getting that done. It's been a huge weight on everyone's shoulders, wondering when's the extension going to drop, right? And now it's finally done. And another signing too was the Dalton Reisner signing, which honestly, caught me by surprise because we were heading into late May, early June, and still no Dalton Reisner. So you're thinking, okay, they're going to roll with Blake Brandel, but they brought him back on a 1 year deal. Now, what I want to ask you is this more of a depth signing in your estimation, or is there a legitimate left guard competition here for the Minnesota Vikings?
No, I think Reisner is going to start, and I really, really liked that signing specifically, just because we're at a point now with the NFL where I know with the schedule being changed a couple years ago, there was obviously going to be an emphasis on depth, especially with that extra game. But the reality is, even if it was 16 games or now 17, it's the season's a marathon. We're talking about one interior or even one exterior lineman, that for that matter, getting stepped on, their foot gets stepped on, that maybe they roll an ankle, maybe they're out 4, 5, 6 weeks, whatever. And when you can have a player of the caliber of Reisner this late in free agency for as cheap of a deal as we got him, when we already have concerns on the interior part of the offensive line. I'm looking at the depth chart right now. The current backup offensive linemen are Blake Brandel, veteran offensive lineman Dan Feeney, and Tyrese Robinson. And I know we drafted Michael Juergens on day 3 this year, but Hopefully Michael Jurgens works out, but at the end of the day, he's a seventh round pick for a reason. And if you can get a starting caliber, even if it's a slightly below average, I mean not that Reisner is, but even if you can get a slightly below average starter at this point, I mean you have to take that dart throw, especially for what equates to just 2.5 million. So I think Reisner will start. I think he will beat out Blake Brandel, and I think the interior part of the offensive line will be Reisner, Bradbury, and then Ingram as we enter 2024.
Yeah, and Reisner was, really efficient as a pass blocker last season. I thought he performed admirably and, in the place of Ezra Cleveland. Although the interesting thing here is that basically the entire Vikings coaching staff has said like, "Hey, we believe in Blake Brandel, and he's getting all these first team reps at OTAs and minicamp." So it feels like right now Brandel's the guy at left guard, which is odd because this time, like 6 months ago, it was the opposite. It was Dalton Reisner starting, and Blake Brandel was the backup left guard, and now it's kind of swapped. So I'm curious to see whether or not that sticks. Heading into training camp, heading into week one, is Brandel still the de facto number one, or is that just kind of fluff? Or, you know, not that they would go out of their way to lie about that, but
Sure.
I guess it's more like, how long of a leash does Blake Brandel have? Like if they get out in week one or the first 4 weeks and he struggles, how long before they just say, you know what, Reisner, we're putting you back in, you're the starter for the rest of the way?
Either way, I'm all for iron sharpens iron. I mean, the reality is both those guys know that the future of their at least starting NFL career is obviously going to depend on their own shoulders, and then the downfall, if you will, of the other. But the reality is if you're out there giving your all every single day, which obviously both guys are, I don't see how that doesn't benefit the team and the rest of the offense for that matter.
For sure, man. And another thing too is we've talked all off season about just like the TJ Hawkinson injury and when's he gonna come back? And it's probably not gonna be till mid-season. But another guy who's hurt and has yet to practice is Andrew Van Ginkel, who we signed this offseason from the Dolphins. He's dealing with some sort of foot injury, and he's still not really out there doing much. I think he was doing what, boxing drills, not too long ago, if I recall correctly. But is his injury in absence, or excuse me, is his absence a cause for concern for you? Or is this just kind of like, a minor tweak?
So I'm not going to pretend that I know the medicals there specifically, but what I would say regarding Van Ginkel and this is I don't worry about it. I don't think this is I know there's probably going to be some initial thoughts that, oh, this is Marcus Davenport 2.0. I don't think that's going to be the case. The reality is Van Ginkel is an extremely intelligent player, and Christian Wilkins, who just signed a $100 million plus contract with the Raiders, previously at the Dolphins. Obviously, he was also Van Ginkel's teammate for the past 4 or 5 years. He said that he is the smartest football player he has ever played with. So if you have that type of praise from not just, a coach here and there, maybe, trying to get on your good side or whatever, maybe you could vouch for him down the line, but your peers as well, and a very good peer at that is Christian Wilkins is a very good defensive tackle. I don't have any concerns with that. And not only that, but Van Ginkel also played under Brian Flores back in 2019. So I don't think this is, like in an extreme exaggeration here. This isn't Tom Brady trying to run the same offense Lamar Jackson would. This is where it's going to fit like a glove. Van Ginkel is very familiar with everything. He's very familiar with the terminology. Flores runs a lot of NTTs, which are referred to as non-traditional Tampas. Van Ginkel is going to be fine, and even if he doesn't get as many reps as other, as many as coaches would like, with his intelligence, with his wherewithal, and with his prior relationship with Flores, I don't worry about this in the slightest.
Yeah, I think Vikings fans still have a little bit of some Marcus Davenport, PTSD. And of course, he ends up signing with the Lions. And, you feel like they're just going to be on the wrong side of that, where he's just going to have like 2 sacks against your team sometime next year in one game. But, I spent time watching Van Ginkel because I happen to write, for a website. where they're having me cover the Dolphins, and he was a very, high end third pass rusher. Like he could probably start, at outside linebacker in a 3-4 on most NFL teams. The only reason he didn't is because he was behind Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips. So, and both of those guys are really freaking good. So, I don't think, it's detriment on his part. So having him as sort of your second or third guy, depending on the development of Dallas Turner, is going to be really big for this Vikings defense. Um, and last but not least, man, what are you most looking forward to seeing at mandatory minicamp here?
So there's two big things. One's probably going to surprise you. But of course the JJ to JJ, I think everybody's just looking forward to seeing that, and seeing not just a clip here or there, not just a glimpse, kind of like Bigfoot. You might catch a glimpse, but seeing your hopeful franchise quarterback throw to who I think is the best receiver in the league, and hopefully build a relationship for the next 5, 6, 7 years if we're lucky. That's of course going to be one. But today it was announced that N'Keal Harry, who was a first round disappointing receiver for the Patriots, he was a first round pick back in 2019, is getting moved to tight end. And I'm eager to see how that goes. Obviously, because N'Keal I thought he was a really good prospect coming out of Arizona State 5 years ago. And I mean, I don't think he's going to become a 1,000-yard player by any means, but I am eager to see how he is used as a receiving tight end, because you would have to imagine that as a former receiver, he's not going to be a blocking tight end. He's not going to be, the same skill set as a 270-pound George Kittle. It's not like N'Keal's put on 50 or 60 pounds this offseason. But I'm eager to see how Kevin O'Connell uses him throughout camp, and I'm eager to see really the progression of him, because there is absolutely a role to be claimed and a role to be able to be stepped up in before TJ Hawkinson comes back from his torn ACL.
So Nikhil, the interesting thing about that was, you know, a buddy of mine, Jason, actually had this several months before it was announced today that Nikhil Harry would be switching to tight end. Apparently, he saw him as a client at some orthopedics place,
Oh wow.
and he was basically in off-season mode, trying to sort of change his body type to fit the mold of a tight end. So I'm really interested to see how that goes with N'Keal Harry, just because, the Vikings tight end room right now is really interesting because, obviously Hawkinson's hurt and you have Oliver, who's probably just going to remain as the blocker, even though they gave him, quite a bit of money just to sign here last year. But you've got Munt, who's described as like the third best, or excuse
The
me,
best third tight end. Yeah. Hell
best
yeah,
third tight
baby.
end in the league, right? And Nick Muse is kind of interesting, but we
Don't forget
signed
about Robert
Tanyan.
Tunyon. Yeah,
Yeah,
Robert
Robert
Tunyon.
Tunyon, and now you've got N'Keal Harry in the mix. So I feel like there's two different styles of tight end there, with like guys like Munt and Nick Muse being the smaller, faster tight ends, and then you've got your N'Keal Harrys and your Robert Tunyons, who are just like 6'5", over the middle kind of guys, right? So I think they're trying to figure out who's going to be that bigger target over the middle until TJ Hawkinson comes back. Because as much as I like Muntz and Nick Muse, they're they're more like move tight ends almost. So that'll be interesting to watch. And then what I'm most looking forward to seeing is sort of like that wide receiver 4 battle, because I feel like wide receiver 3 is just going to be like Jalen Naylor, because he was taking reps with the ones last season before he got hurt. Obviously, you've got Powell there, but you have like your Tristan Jacksons, your Lucky Jacksons, your Thayer Thomases, just like the wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5. We've got a lot of, interesting uh, backup wide receivers who are vying for roster spots. Jashawn Jones is another one who we gave quite a bit of money to, and you know, undrafted free agency. So I'll be looking at the wide receivers a little bit just to see who really stands out with their route running and whatnot. granted, it's only mini camp, so there's no pads or anything, but that's probably the one position group where you can kind of glean the most from, just because, the advantages for the offensive side of the ball there. Um, and with that, that pretty much sums up our episode. Garrett, thanks so much for coming on.
Of course, appreciate you having me.